Good evening, golf friends, and welcome to our webinar series, Tuesday Traces. The purpose of this webinar is to show how the V1 pressure mat is used. We're going to hear about ground pressure in swing sports and how to analyze the athlete, the golfer, or the baseball player. Welcome to all the folks that registered and have joined us via the Zoom webinar, and welcome to the folks that are tuning in via our Facebook Live channel. The recording of tonight's webinar will be available on our V1 Sports YouTube channel in a few days. Anna will edit it and she will post it there. If you are registered, you will automatically get an invitation to that recording in your email inbox. We love answering questions throughout the evening, so please post your questions over in the chat window. If you're joining us from Facebook, you can absolutely put questions in your Facebook chat. My girls will watch and they'll send them over to me and I'll get Phil and Chad to answer them. We'll do our best to get to all of them throughout the hour. A little bit about who we are. So V1 Sports is a 25-year-old company and the leader in delivering video analysis and instruction solutions to golfers and golf instructors around the world. More than 4 million lessons have been delivered by more than 10,000 V1 golf coaches. We have a huge network of people using our software. When the V1 team saw an opportunity to expand into the baseball market, they were confident athletes and coaches would be just as eager for the trusted feedback V1 delivers. So now we're in the baseball industry. V1 Sports is the leader in ground pressure and how the V1 pressure mat technology can uncover truths about player movement, specifically in swing sports. I am Mandy Von C. I'm the Southeast Regional Sales Manager for V1 Sports based in beautiful Charleston, South Carolina. I am the team cheerleader. I love my team. I love all the amazing people we get to talk to. And I love putting this cool technology in the hands of instructors who are making better swings in swing sports. I have hosted over 30 Tuesday Traces for our golf audience, and I could not be more excited to expand our community to include some new baseball friends. Phil and Chad, welcome to Tuesday Traces.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mandy. Thanks for having us.
All right, a little bit about my friends Phil and Chad. So Phil Stotter, he is the one. Phil, wave so everybody knows. You can see his name. That's Phil. He's got the big cool V1 logo behind him. So Phil Stotter is our new V1 Sports Director of Sports Science. We're so excited to have him on our team. Phil's primary project is a physical therapy and medical tech tools that helps doctors assess and diagnose a whole bunch of potential issues, from concussions to vestibular deficiencies. Yes, he's going to make us all smarter. The Mayo Clinic uses Phil's technology, if that's not the best reference ever. He has over 25 years of experience in performance, corrective, and preventative sports and healthcare, including settings, including the MoFlex, a unique ground up foot and ankle fitness rehab and sports training device. We'll definitely ask you about that later, Phil. His day-to-day focus is definitely on ground mechanics and how to use the technology to augment the test treat or test train intervention process. Personally, Phil is cool and the dad of 4 sons and a total baseball nut. So Phil, thanks for joining us. I'm so excited to have you here.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Mandy. Excited to be a part of the V1 team.
We are too. And this audience is going to love it because you guys, Phil knows everything about ground pressure. He loves baseball, but he's going to teach all of us golfers stuff too. All right, let's hear about Chad. So Chad Tyndall owns and operates Brew State Baseball Academy in Wisconsin. He also owns and operates Biomechanics, which is a holistic baseball company that implements strength and conditioning and ground pressure. Chad has 20 plus years of experience as a baseball instructor, training under the likes of John Malik, Clint Myers, and former Cubs hitting coordinator, Justin Stone. I am a Cubs fan, so I like that stat myself. Chad was a coach at the University of Wisconsin Parkside and managed U.S. Baseball Academy camps for 5 years. Chad has played in Beijing, China, and coached in Perth, Australia. You guys, welcome to Tuesday Traces. I'm so excited you're here. I'm so excited to hear a little bit of a different perspective about ground pressure. And welcome to my crazy webinar series.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. No, definitely, Mandy. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. You guys, we're going to get some questions answered tonight. If you have questions, please, like I said, put them in the chat window. I know we have a little bit of a different audience. We've got baseball and golfers, but Phil can absolutely answer questions about both sports, and Chad is going to give us a really cool perspective as well. Okay, so you guys, I've heard that the baseball community is calling the next frontier in technology ground pressure. Phil, we have a mixed audience of baseball and ground enthusiasts, but please tell us generally, what is ground pressure?
No, for sure. No, great question. So when we talk about ground pressure, we talk about biomechanics and the biomechanics. And I'm just going to make sure I stay simple. And if I get too up here, bring me back down to here. But biomechanics, study of human body, study of movements, the way we move, the way we do things, right? And when we talk about ground mechanics, we talk about our relationship with the ground. And when we talk about biomechanics or mechanical, we talk about two words, kinematic and kinetic. One is just movement. The other one has forces against or forces with it. And when we're dealing with ground pressure, we're measuring forces, and when we're using a V1 pressure mat, we're measuring those forces or how our forces are acting on it. And in life, there's three main things that are at play. It's basically us, which is a mass, right? It's a small mass. There is a larger mass called the world around us, our Earth, that we stand on every day, we move from, and we have this thing called gravity. And those three things play on each other. And when they play on each other, it's our relationship. It's how we control ourselves in space. And so if we're in a clinical or medical sense, we test these things. We test it as postural control, or the fun word balance, and how we interpret our relationship and how we use basically neurological, sensory, or neuromuscular or musculoskeletal systems to interact with gravity and the Earth. And so when we talk about ground mechanics, we talk about this relationship. We try to understand it. And in sports, it's a little bit different. We're functional, we're dynamic, we've got linear momentum, we've got angular momentum, we've got all these crazy things going on. And we're also looking at exactly what's going on and what those results are. In medicine, we're typically doing standardized testing, whether it's for a concussion protocol and how someone is stabilizing after a contact injury. If it's just an elderly person that's walking on the street, how well they perceive themselves in space and how they use these different systems. So when we talk about ground mechanics, I'm going to circle it right back in now. We're talking about how our mass interacts with the world around us. And so that's probably as simple as I can make it.
So why do I care if I'm a golfer or a baseball instructor? Force. Why do I care about measuring my force or my pressure with the ground?
No, for sure. Well, we need to understand there's force and there's pressure, and those two things are interrelated. And, a lot of times in sports, we hear about force plates and we hear about pressure mats or pressure sensing systems. And what is that? Are they different? Are they same? Well, let's go back into physics here.
Force plate versus pressure mat. Okay. What's the difference?
Yeah, no, for sure. And everybody always asks this question. And in medicine, we use both, and one can complement the other. And one can be used instead of the other, and one can be more complex than the other. But force, let's just talk about force plates and what it measures, okay? So force measures basically force in a singular direction. It's called a vector, all right? And that singular direction gives you a singular output, okay? And that's X, Y, and Z, all right? So we can see different things with that information, that data, okay? And it's usually, in the past, we've used it for jump test and we use it for different things because the way it measures it is force over a period of time. All right, let's remember that, okay? Force and time, that time curve, okay? But let's remember singular but multidimensional. Pressure is different. Pressure can capture those types of forces, but it also can segment it because pressure is basically force over an area, which is scalar. All right, so over an area of body, okay, over the bottom of our foot, okay? So if I want to know exactly the segmentation of or part of my foot that creates force at a single moment in a time, say it's in a golf swing, say it's in a baseball swing, using pressure, I'm able to collect that data. All right, and I'm able to collect that data per square inch, per cubic centimeter, whatever it is. Let's say it's PSI per square inch, right? Pounds per square inch. You can capture that information. And if you're a coach and you've done coaching or you've done analysis, we want to know exactly where that pressure lies during all those different types of movements. We don't want just one number. We want a series of a series of events, all those sequences happening. We don't want just one, okay, here's 120 pounds of force as I slam my foot down on the ground. Well, doesn't mean I can swing a golf club, does it? But if I can analyze where that pressure is in my foot, that turns into actual pressure and forces into my body, because we have to remember what we're doing here with both force plates and pressure mats is we're recording ground reaction forces, okay? And I'll stop in a second, but ground reaction force is basically, it's what's mirroring us. It's the reflection of us in the ground, okay? So let's make it really simple really quick. I'm just gonna give a little lesson here, right? If I move my arm in space, okay, what's acting on my arm? All right, gravity, right? But what force is going back against me? Nothing, right? Because it's open chains, we call it. But if I put my foot on the ground and I put that force against the ground, Newton's third law is an equal action, to a reaction. And so that force, I said that wrong, but the force comes against my body, an equal amount of force I'm applying to it. When I do that, that force has to come back through my body. That energy has to travel through my body. Where does it travel? Let's hope it gets all the way out to that bat and the ball and when it hits the ball, or that club and when it hits the ball. All right. So what I push into the ground is an equal change onto my body, and which creates force. That's why I can hit the ball.
Say that again.
Yep.
That's what we need. Say it again. The force you push into the ground equally comes back out. Say it again.
Yep, and it generates the power and velocity that I can create angular or linear momentum. Okay, and we'll talk about angular and linear momentum in a minute, because angular momentum is found in both sports. Linear is typically found more in golf. We'll talk about that later. But that's how I generate force. Let's think about this. If I'm floating in space and I go to swing a golf club, do you think I'm gonna hit that ball pretty good? Probably not, unless I'm just really, really coordinated, right? Let's say, for instance, let's make it really simple, okay? Say I'm trying to move a couch, a really heavy couch, all right? Do I jump up in the air and then try to move the couch? No, I wanna press against the floor, get my butt against the wall, and I wanna create a reactional force to drive that to have the power, right? And where power comes from velocity, and I'm able then to, create force, right? And in golf, I've got a static ball sitting there. All I got to do is hit it. In baseball, I got a 90-mile-an-hour ball coming at me that I got to create some good force against, right? And I got to do something against that. So it's really important to understand why. So I'm getting back to, why do we measure, right? Why do we measure force? Why is it important? Why is this the new frontier? Because a lot of people don't understand it. They don't know how to put, normative data around it. In the medical space, we do, we've understood this. We've been doing this type of testing for postural control, sway index, those types of things. In sports, it's a little bit different. And we've been trying to do this in jump tests and research, but how does that coach out there, that guy that lives down the street from me, that coaches, or a baseball instructor, golf instructor, how does he know how to read this information? One of the big things we always want to do is we want to make sure the interpretation of technology is useful, right? Because anybody can create any type of, technology, throw some numbers out there, and they don't mean a thing, right? We want to make sure that we teach that. So education component is so key to everything you do when you're dealing with technology, biomechanics, all these types of things. And that's kind of, the purpose of why we're really focused here at V1 of focusing more on sports science now.
I love that. So can you really quickly just tell us the difference between a force plate and a pressure mat?
I basically did, but I will do it again. So
well, I know, I just mean like the two different, the pieces of technology.
No, for sure. So again, going back to the principle a force plate measures vectors, okay, singular dimension. Pressure measures scalar over an area. When we're dealing with segmentation of the body and body movement, it's important to be able to capture that information. Force plates are typically strain gauges. You have to set them up, you have to calibrate them, okay? I took a pressure mat today, I threw it down on a mound, and we had pitchers go right at it, all right? There was no calibration, there was nothing like that. I was able to see segmentation of what was going on through their foot, what was going on to their body. I found their trace angular momentum. I was able to capture a lot of information very quick and very easily to understand.
Okay,
and
so
it can get very complex too.
Phil, you're so smart. That's where I'm getting. I'm trying to prove the point that as a golf instructor or a baseball instructor or a golf student or a baseball student, we can capture the information that you're sharing with a pressure mat that I can throw on an airplane in a carrying case in my bag that is so easy to move around. It's ridiculous. I have you can see mine set. There it is. Mine's in my living room. See it? We were messing on it earlier. There it is, sitting there. Anyway, So not to challenge you, but yes, I wanted to point out that a force plate is permanent. You cannot put it on an airplane. It does not roll up in a bag. And the V1 pressure mat does. It is so easy and lightweight and awesome. Okay. Can you talk about the metrics that we're getting from the data and what we're going to do with them? Or do you want to show a swing and sort of talk about?
Yeah, let's get Chad involved. Let's
Yeah.
well, we can
Chad, why?
talk. I mean, maybe new people to this, maybe we should go through a really quick because when you're measuring pressure, there's different ways to measure it, and there's different graphs and there's different things to look at and all those. I mean, I can go on all night about that, but what is the V1 pressure mat? What does it measure? And because there's a lot more than what we measure, but we measure what's important and we keep it simple. We make it in such a way that it's really simple to interpret. Like I'm going back there again. Interpretation of technology is critical. Trust me, it's misunderstood. That's why technologies typically don't last, because basically, unless you're some researcher, some science guy, some, whatever, you don't get it. I need to get this. And when I talk to coaches and I talk to, different athletes, they need to be able to see that information, understand that information. One of the great things that we do at V1 is we do biofeedback. That biofeedback gives me 3 graphs that give me a really good understanding of what's going on during my swing. I mean, we can use this for pitching. We can use this for functional movement, you name it. I mean, our focus here is baseball swings and golf swings, but it's always important to simplify things, because if you simplify the complexity of any type of science, of any type of technology, it becomes useful. And if it's not useful, it's not worth anything, right? But why don't I don't know if Anna has it. Maybe we could just throw up those quick graphs. I definitely want to get Chad involved. Chad and I have done a lot of research in this space. We've spent a lot of time working on different things. Love to share some of that information. Now, this is a video of someone swinging, but do we have the PDF or the PowerPoint of the 3 different graphs? It's a
Anna, do you
sneak
have
peek
that?
At the baseball level 1 certification. So people maybe get a little sneak peek tonight.
Hold up. We're going to get that pulled up in 2 seconds. Anna, can you give me sharing privileges? Anthony, can you send me that real quick one more time? And hey, do you mind talking to that video while we get that slideshow?
Yeah, it's fine. Let's do that.
Yeah, Kelly, we need that. We need you to send that. We didn't get the full PDF earlier when we were chatting about it. Hey guys, sorry, we have our internal Slack messaging group. And so we got a screen capture of the slideshow, but no one actually got the slideshow. So here we are on Tuesday Traces. We're going to have a little minute break and we're going to grab this graphic and we're going to pull it up in 2 seconds. I got like 6 people behind the scenes getting me that graphic in a second. I guarantee you it's going to come across in any minute.
It's okay. Hey, why don't we jump right into a conversation? Let's talk about, pressure and measuring pressure and how we've measured pressure in golf, how we measure pressure in baseball, the forces that apply, and going back to what I just talked about. Chad and I have done some research in this area, and partly due to something maybe you guys missed before, maybe you heard. It's a simple 2 words, postural control. And a lot of people know this as balance. And if you're swinging a golf club or if you're swinging a baseball bat, your ability to control your action is what's most important. And a lot of times when you're trying to teach someone or you're trying to teach yourself how to do a certain sport specific act, it's really hard to explain what you feel. Okay. And one thing that you'll hear me say over and over from here on is being able to see the feel. All right. It's really hard, especially, coming back from a clinical background. I study human motion. I study gait mechanics. I study these types of things that most people can't see the things I see. All right. You have to be trained. I've been doing this over 25 years. What pressure mats, what force plates, what this type of pressure measurement, this force measurement does, it allows you to see things that someone feels. And that's huge. It's really important. If I'm doing therapy on somebody and I'm doing biofeedback with them, and I want them to put their pressure or their center of gravity in a certain space, okay? how do I tell them how to do that without me seeing it? All right. It's not like center of gravity is going to pop out and say, hi, Phil, here I am. Where do you want me? The pressure mat allows us to see that information. It allows us to know if this person has the ability to dorsiflex on the backside, to be able to unweight their body, to get that pressure in the heel, to generate force from that, to create that motion that'll take us an angular momentum that creates torque, and that's what creates basically the power of rotation of our body. It's really hard to see that. You know, video cameras really don't pick that up. Other things don't pick that up. By seeing that force that's applied, by seeing that percentage that's applied, you have a better understanding how this person is controlling their body. And when we talk about trace, the COP trace, what we measure in the clinical side is we basically measure a displacement from a center point, okay? And that basically tells us how balanced you are, how in control of your body you are. That same thing's at play when you're doing a functional actual movement. And so if you're going through a swing, that trace that's been measured in golf many, many times, and I've watched this happen, you know, that's distinct. It's distinct, and I can test you, whether it's a sensory test, we do a clinical test of sensory interaction of balance, we do neuromuscular tests, muscle skeletal tests. These types of tests allow us to know how much control you have. And here's a little point thing, and I'll bring this up in a later webinar. We're able to tell who's vision deficient, who's vision dependent. We find that pitchers, when we test pitchers, that they're very vision dependent. They really use that sensory of vision almost too much, okay? Where it weakens some of our proprioceptive abilities. And that's our ability to control ourselves in space. We find that catchers have great vestibular, okay, gaze and change of direction. That's really important. It's really crazy. There's even studies that are coming out to work with catchers to do therapeutic movements for it. Why am I talking about all this? The science of ground pressure is so big, and it's the new frontier. Even though posturography has been around since the 1800s, when we stood on ink and then we stepped on a piece of paper and we said, okay, here's our pressure. It's come a long way into the digital world.
Talk about it. That's a long way. Okay, so we have the deck ready. If you want to go through that real quick, we've got even more people have joined us. So I think it's a good time to kind of go back through some basics. Thank you for getting that sent over to our group team. Okay, here we go.
Excellent.
You see this, Phil? Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like a PDF of it. Why don't we cycle? Let's go down a couple pages. Let's find, if you just want to go. We talked about, you know, the concept of that weight versus pressure. We can talk about that later, but let's go back. Let's see what we got there. No, we don't need that. Go one more down. No, the up. I'm sorry, up. I'm slightly blind. There we go. Reading ground pressure. All right. So for those that don't know ground pressure, okay, and what we're reading there and what you're seeing on that map, pressure map right there, is basically a heat map of someone's feet. Okay. And I guarantee they had shoes on, because those are some, you know, crazy looking feet if they didn't. What we see, what I see, okay, I can tell a person's foot type from that. I can tell their tendency. I can tell a lot of different things, but I'm a trained professional for this. This is not what the purpose here is. It's just keep it simple, right? So what you see there is a heat map, and within that heat map, the red, yellow, blue, that's all different segmentation of, like I talked about before, pounds per square inch. That's PSI, or it's different ways we can measure that too. We can calculate that different ways, but that's the segmentation in that foot. And so we say forefoot or rear foot. Some people say heels or toes, whatever you want to call it. And you see those percentages on the left side and on the right side of that screen. That's basically how we're measuring how much horizontal force or horizontal pressures that's going on, anterior, posterior.
Can I interrupt you? When you say percentages, team, Anna, can you circle the percentages that Phil is talking about? The 98 or the 2 or the 48 or the 58, or sorry, 48 or 52. When he's talking about percentages, and this is what means something to everyone, we're actually talking about pressure or force in certain parts of the swing, baseball or golf. Those are the percentages that are what we're looking for. So when Phil mentions the percentages, left or right foot, heels or toes, these are the percentages that he's talking about. Thank you, Anna, for your graphics. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, I like the interruption. It's good. It's detailed. Yeah. You know, people get lost in my mumbo jumbo. So
we want to make sure everybody knows what we're looking at.
Yeah, exactly. So let's start with the first force, vertical force coming up. What am I measuring in those heat maps? That's that pressure, that's that force, okay? I'm applying down. Let's go really simple. A pressure mat, a force plate, let's imagine it's a scale, okay? It's our weight, okay? It's basically
Okay.
what we weigh because of gravity, all right? So that's what you're seeing an impression there. What makes pressure so special is that segmentation. You know, in medicine, we need that segmentation to really get precise findings. Without that segmentation, I can't tell if, you know, someone's got, you know, plantar fasciitis or other different types of foot disorders. I can't get one single, you know, vector that tells me that type of thing. I'm not able to decode that information. The same applies in, say, a golf swing. Where's that pressure? What part of that foot is that pressure in? And when is that pressure applied during that swing? When you see those percentages, you know, on the either side of that graph there, okay, going anterior, posterior, again, toes, heels, that's basically a horizontal pressure, okay? That's the pressure of the front of my foot, the back of my foot. It's a movement in a horizontal plane, okay? Side to side, you know, what's going on as I move side to side? We have our vertical, right? We have our side to side, right? And those percentages are critical for the way we move. And it's really important to understand what those percentages should be at a certain time within a functional movement. All right. And so whether it's the phases of a golf swing or the phases of a baseball swing, you know, where should that pressure be? And a lot of coaches already know this. They already know where the load should be. Now coaches can see exactly if that's happening. You know, I was in a think tank just recently and we were talking about it, touchdown with a front stride foot, you know, getting that pressure to the heel. You know, some players think they're getting enough pressure there. This shows us exactly where that pressure is. It tells us how much pressure is actually calculated. Chad, go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, Chad, do you see that question in the chat?
I can pull it up. No, I didn't see anything.
Yeah, so I think, Chad, you're a baseball coach, and Jim Starrett has asked a pretty good question, and I would love for one of you to talk to it specifically, this word angular. So I'm a salesperson in the golf industry, so I'm learning the verbiage for baseball. But Jim's question is, please make sure that Philip details, or Chad details, that golf transfers more energy to linear movements and not angular. Is angular like a baseball thing?
I think rotation, I think both have it, but I mean, rotation's a huge part of swinging a baseball bat. I'll let Phil answer that, but I was actually going to speak to something else. So I'll let him answer that first.
You know, so, yeah, so, you know, good.
Yeah, he wants to make sure that golf is more dominantly angular. He's saying golf is more dominantly angular. So will you talk to that comment?
Yeah, let's talk about linear momentum and angular momentum, okay? And so linear momentum is basically momentum in a straight line, right? Angular momentum is an angled direction, which creates spiral, okay? So it's off a pivot point. So if I have a pole that goes in the ground, all right, and we go to turn that pole that creates torque, let's say there's a rope on and there's a ball at the end of the string. When I go to do that, it creates an angular momentum that creates this angular trace, okay? If we're looking for a straight vertical force, if I'm batting and I force the bat towards the ball, I'm going in a linear plane. I want to rotate and bring the bat, okay? We want to bring the end of that bat. We want to bring the hands through and bring, maybe not even seeing me, but bring the end of the bat, through. That's creating angular momentum. We want angular momentum. I would say in golf, angular momentum is typically your drivers, and that's very similar to baseball. You know, we're always looking for angular momentum in baseball unless we're bunting the ball. If we're getting into some of our smaller, wedges or irons or whatever, then we're looking more linear. We want that linear progression, that linear force going on. It's controlled. I know exactly how far that ball should go. It's a controlled amount of force. I don't need to create an angular momentum to create that amount of distance or force or velocity, because I already pretty much have it understood where I want that ball to go. Two things just to remember: linear, straight, angular on an angle. That's what creates rotation. That's what creates torque. And so that's something that we just have to remember when we talk about, biometrics and the science of sports movement. Chad, go for it, buddy.
Well, yeah, I mean, when we were talking about, from a coach's perspective, when you're using the mat, I mean, one of the first things that I ever did when I got our mat immediately was trying to get kids into their heel. It's the only way to get them in their back hip and actually help them with their angular momentum or the rotation that is necessary to hit a baseball. You would have kids that would be looking at this finally for the first time, and they can actually see these heat maps finally light up in their back heel. Some of these kids, it was a huge challenge because they're so strong into their forefoot, and that would go deeper into stuff that Phil and I have talked about with even just, kind of getting their thumbprint, so to speak, of what their foot looks like on the ground naturally. But when you're working with a kid like that, it was amazing how much it took some kids to finally actually get into the ground and understand, okay, I need to be back here more. We talk about 10-pound dumbbells in their back pockets. That's a cue that I got from Albert Pujols. But, at the end of the day, that didn't make sense until we finally put this out in front of them, and then just bang, in a matter of 5 minutes, we had a kid getting in his hip like he had never been in before. The mat can be amazing that way. It's just it's an immediate biofeedback that allows the athlete to go, okay, and it turns on a light bulb that simply sometimes cueing cannot do. The human language, we like to look at it and think that, oh, it's completely objective, but it's so subjective. I lay down and I work on cueing all the time because it's so important for me to have multiple ones, because at times the tech isn't going to necessarily make the change we want. But here, and especially when we're talking about getting in the ground, which helps every hitter get in their back hip, this works perfectly. Another example with this would be front foot stuff. When you're talking about getting into the front foot, Phil and I were messing around with some stuff. He was explaining kind of, the difference between the toes and the heels. And, you're going to accelerate better if you get into your front heel quicker, which will help with lead leg blocking. I'm not sure if that's what it's called in golf. Maybe bracing, it might be called in golf. But I was working with a kid that, we would definitely have to do some strength and conditioning stuff. That would be where we actually start with him. But I immediately started doing some actual primers, we call them, that was working with him going from toe to heel, just functioning toe to heel primers. And then all of a sudden we had him on the mat, and we were able to get him into his heel, and bang, man, his exit velocities went up 6 miles an hour in a matter of 20 minutes. That's was amazing. Yeah.
Hey, really, Anna, will you kill the share for a second? I'm fascinated by this coach's perspective of the mat. Okay, so Chad, curious. Yeah. Do you guys ever say this feel versus real, two different things?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So how many times have you have a student there and you're like, you've got to get in your heels. And they tell you, oh, I'm in my heels. And right. You're not. And here, I'm showing it to you. So I love that, to all my golf friends, and I know all of you that, hey, Ted Moon's here. Thanks, Ted, for joining us. And Jim Altamirano, our favorite guest ever, who's been at all 31, he's here too. But you guys, I love that visual of weights in the back pockets. That's so good. Chad, here's another nugget that we've always said: lift your toes up in your shoes, but I've been using it. I love that, right? Yeah. It's my own swing thought, is to lift my toes up so I really have weight in my heels.
And that's from golf way back when, isn't it? Like, I was reading some stuff on golf. I nerded out on golf stuff to try to get better as a baseball coach, because you guys had such a strong advancement in tech that we didn't have. And that was from like the 50s or something. I think an old golf book where a gentleman talked about curling up your toes because it brought you to your heels stronger, and then the ball of your foot was actually engaged a lot better as well. And I do the same thing. We go barefoot hitting a lot with tee work only, because obviously it's dangerous any other place in baseball, because you break a toe really quickly if you fall one off it. So, right. But absolutely, I use that same very one. And I literally, first time a kid hears it, I flip my shoe off. They think I'm weird as heck, which I kind of am anyways, and that's okay. But
we're all weird. When it comes to this stuff, we're all weird. It's cool. They all know. All the people over there, they all know. We're all weird.
Yep, cool. Absolutely. But it helps my players. It helps my hitters. And again, that's a visual thing. That's better than language. So I show it to them. I take my shoe off and I show it to them. And then they see it on the mat, and it really explodes their ability to understand the feel versus real, like you said.
Right. So you guys, all the people tuning in, we have Phil, he's part of our team, and we're going to have lots of webinars for him to pick all these crazy, amazing things about how to read the metrics out of his brain. But I really think it's cool and fun that no matter what the swing sport is, by showing a student the data and actually seeing it, feel and real is two different things. No matter what sport it is, we're making improvements in the swing. based on seeing the pressure. Curious, Chad, do you put the iPad on a tripod in front of the student?
Yeah, I actually literally have it where they hold it. They hold it in their hand. We have one that just kind of wraps around their hand and they're just reading it and just trying to work in, like, again, if it was the first lesson where we're trying to help them get into their back heel so they can get into their back hip, we have them holding that, and they're just, it's amazing. You see some very light patterns that are like almost ghost patterns, I call them. You can't even see any pressure, and it's only, and then all of a sudden they start going, okay. And then they're also starting to engage and understand how much and how, like, the muscle fibers you're using in your legs and your calves and everything, how that needs to be engaged to really be into the ground. I think that's an important part too. A lot of people, I tell my students, a lot of you guys live on top of the ground. You don't live in the ground. I want you to think about yourself as a tree, and it has a root system. And if your feet aren't exploding through the ground, creating a root system, you're not going to hit. I played with guys that were 200 pounds, and you can't tell up here, but I eventually got up to like playing at 180, but I'm not a very big guy, but I could out hit those guys about 50 to 100 feet. And that was the difference of living in the ground compared to living on top of it. And that's really what we're trying to teach them. And that's why I fell in love with this. I use a lot of different technology, but this definitely is my favorite. And I think it's the most important place to put my energy. And I really think it's the most important place for whether you're a golf coach or a baseball coach to put your energy. It's just your relationship to the ground helps with different things. And I don't know if we want to get into it now, but the adaptations that happen in our sport are a little bit different than in golf. But I imagine there's adaptations in golf swings that, even just the way you guys set up and stuff, that affect how you're going to be able to attack your ball and be able to manipulate it, whether you're trying to lay up on a green or if you're really trying to power through a ball and get hit off the tee box and try to, drive as far as possible. And, it really, this technology has a lot of really cool things that have already kind of been explored, but there's a lot more, especially in our sport. I'm really excited to completely dig in on this stuff because there's so much adaptation in our sport.
I love that. And, thank you so much for your perspective. And I totally think it applies to baseball and golf here. And I'm fascinated, Chad, and I'm sorry to get a little off of our agenda, but this is sort of how it happens. But you teach a lot of kids. You're majority teaching kids, right? Do you have any older, baseball guys that are maybe pro that are seeing this pressure being like light bulbs are going off? Yeah,
we've worked with pro guys, with college kids, and you're right, though most of my athletes are 18 and down. I think that will continue to grow. I'm in the Midwest and specifically outside of the Chicago market. I think sometimes people are a little slower to adapt to technology. I've lived out west, and I certainly kind of have seen how that stuff, the adaptability there. And again, our sport is very much, I always told people, and I've been saying it for years, and we're finally starting to catch up. We've been 15 years behind golf and tech for and I said that 15, 20 years ago. We're starting to catch up, but I don't think we know what we're actually looking at, and we're trying to wrap our head around it. And I don't think that everybody are doing a good job. But getting back to your question, with the pro guys that we've done it with, they've been able to explore, because we had guys that were really just linear swingers, which allows, for baseball, that becomes a problem for him to be able to deliver his barrel and to really, again, it would be comparing a person on the driving. If they're driving the golf ball, it'd be the same thing. If they're completely linear and they're not getting a strong amount of angular force, they're gonna struggle with hitting the ball very far, and they're also probably gonna get blown up on really good fastballs. So we were able to really start to be able to have him punch the ground, and it really started making a difference. And believe it or not, it actually, in baseball, you would think, okay, that's just going to be power, but he was able to start delivering the ball, and he wouldn't be spinning off balls that he would be hitting to the opposite field. So it became it really was a game changer for all level of athlete. I think this will explode in pro sport as they start to wrap their head around it more, whether it's independent ball, minor league ball, or Major League Baseball. I really think the potential is there. So
I love it. Yeah, I agree. Chad's point here, and I'm backing it up, is you can look at your pressure and in 1 second know more about what's going on just by looking at it. And looking at the data, you can't know it. You don't know what you're doing unless you're looking at the data on a pressure map. You guys, we have 20 minutes left, and we could probably talk for 3 hours, but can we analyze a baseball swing? Can we talk about the pressure in a baseball swing? I think it's fascinating for
Let's
some of
do it.
our
Let's
golf
bring one
friends.
up. Let's
Yeah.
And
bring
while
one up.
Anna pulls it up, we're sharing nuggets that are great for baseball and golf. David McBain is a golf instructor, a very good golf instructor, been in the V1 family forever. He likes move your pelvis into your pocket. So that's another good
There you go.
visual. I like that as well. Thank you, David, for sharing. All right, guys, talk to us about this trace.
Yep. So we have a high school baseball player here, and let's kind of roll through it. If you want to just kind of roll through it, and I'll let Chad talk through it as well, and I'll talk through it and what we're actually capturing here. And let's stop really quick there. Chad, tell me what you're looking at right now as far as what you're seeing, and then I'll go into some details as far as pressure. It's hard for me to see the screen because of the percentages, and it's not coming up because we use a turf surface with the pressure mat. But we're able to get that segmented information. But go ahead, Chad. Why don't you start with this?
Yeah, I mean, early on, it looks like I would say his distribution looks pretty good into his heel. There's a few other things technically that I don't think are applicable here with the ground force stuff. But I mean, I would like to see him actually turn into his back hip a little bit more. And then you would actually probably see his heel number come up a little bit more. I like athletes, as I'm working with them, at least to play with getting that number up to 70 early on, at least to figure out if they can deliver really strong blows.
Okay, wait, I hate to interrupt you. I'm sorry, but when you say bring that number up, can we talk about what that number is? Where is the number? What are you looking at? And
I'm sorry, you have to look at my ugly mug zooming in here. But it looks like it says 62 to 48, if I'm reading that correctly, into his back heel. And so I like that. I like that he's at least 60-40. I would like to see him get to 70-30. Again, I would work with the player longer, but you're always playing with it because that number, it can be highly functional up to 80% for some people, and they can still deliver quality blows and still have barrel accuracy, where others will really struggle with that. And so this might be a perfect amount for this young gentleman, but he's at least 60-40. So I think it's a good starting point.
And to add to Chad's point, what are we looking for here? We have the vision tool, we have the pressure tool, and how is this useful? Useful in sports is consistency, right? We want to be consistent. We want to be able to deliver the same way each time. And what you see from a lot of young players is inconsistency, obviously. And so using a tool like this, we're able to start teaching those consistencies. We're able to grab that data, that quantitative data, so that we can understand where that pressure is, that percentage, forefoot to rear foot, and we can go deeper. We can go into basically, is it on the medial side, lateral side of that? Where is that power coming from? I mean, we've done a bunch of research that shows a valgus varus pattern creates greatest velocities and force. And again, I'll go into that later, but there's a distinct mapping of how our bodies interact that can create what is going to go on in the rest of the body. Now, granted, this individual can create, great power and great positioning and then completely miss. That's, cognitive, vestibular. There's all these other sensory factors that go into hitting a baseball because it's changing speeds, location. I mean, you're basically, having someone get you not to hit the ball instead of golf. You see the ball right there, it's easy to hit. So it's really important to see those fundamentals, to understand where that's coming from. And let's go back to that word, postural balance. Okay, or I'm sorry, postural control. Being in control of my movements. If I'm not in control at my foot level, I am not going to be in control of the rest of my body. I don't care who you are, how great, adapter, reactor you are. Things break down very quickly. And basically all of your force and control basically just kind of drains out as I go through my different motions. So, is important into kind of getting into load, getting set up, understanding where that pressure should be, having that control, getting into those muscles that are really my action muscles. Right now, you can see this individual's unweighting. He's dropping his body. Okay, if we're looking at vertical force right now, that vertical force is going to drop, and then he's going to accelerate, into his stride, and that's what's going to create some of that velocity to the front side. And when he does that, that's where
really quickly, the boss is here, and while we're looking at this trace, I think it's super important to talk about the fact that this graph is flipped from his feet. So as you go through this, will you just
no,
point
for
out?
sure.
Yeah, that's really important. When you're looking at the graph, it's backwards. Now you can flip the graph, I mean, the mat, of course, but will you just talk to that so that what we're looking at, the folks that are tuning in and have never seen this graph,
Yeah,
know that
no,
the
for
right
sure.
knob on the right is the right foot.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's that back foot, is what you're seeing there. And in different types of technology, there's different ways, and you can flip the mat, you can turn it. There's different technologies. Basically, what we're typically seeing when we're looking at force graphs or pressure graphs, we're seeing from the bottom up, what you're seeing going up, in that individual. There's other technologies that basically can show you, top down. But right now, what you're seeing is the reverse here. You're seeing that back foot on what you're looking at the screen on the right side.
I personally, not that it matters, but I personally do flip it because I want my video to match my look. And it's really important for when I'm using it with my student. It's, for us, I think once you get used to it, you're used to it. I don't particularly love it anyways, but my students, I want it to be transferable to them. So if I'm actually showing them it, or when they were reading it, I always had it so they understood exactly what they were looking at without any confusion. So, but that is a very good point.
Yep. Chad, just so you know, Paul Woodbury, a golf instructor in Florence, South Carolina, does the same thing. And he teaches nothing but junior golfers. He uses the linear velocity graph. You guys should go watch that Tuesday Trace. He's doing amazing things with juniors. I think it would make a lot of sense to you.
I will.
Anyway, but yeah, I agree. It's for some people, you can flip the mat. And also, Phil, can you talk to why that mat's blue?
Yeah, that's turf on top of it. So that's like AstroTurf. And because that individual is getting ready for a baseball game, he's actually in metal spikes. And so, you wouldn't really want to get on a carpet golf mat and metal spikes. So we adapt a covering so that we can use it, pre-game, in the cages, getting them warmed up, making sure they're, where they need to be. That's something that we can do. If you're in just a basic tennis shoe or whatever you're going to, practice in, the V1, carpet surface is just fine to use as well. But
yep. Can we use the V1 pressure mat for baseball now?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. And actually, depending on length of stride, depending on what you're looking for, depending on if you're looking for unilateral parameters or metrics, we had, just basically the golf mat right on a pitching mound, and we were looking at, basically backside and what was going on, that control. We weren't even worried about the front side. You can go with a longer length. What you're seeing there is a 5-foot mat. You can go even longer than that to really capture that information. But the mat that's out there with V1, it can capture, most players. And a lot of times, and Chad could speak to this, a lot of times we might even work with some of these younger players off a tee here. This is a live pitch coming in right now that he's working off of. And that's going to look very different than someone even, going off a tee. And,
sure.
Chad can explain the difference between swinging and hitting when it comes to that work. But what's important to understand is what you need to capture, it can be captured unless, you got, a 7-foot tall guy that's got a big strider. But then there's guys that are tall that have short strides. They're not horizontal producers, they're vertical producers. Right. So it really just depends. Right.
Well, and there is a difference. Like in golf, you guys, your swing is you're when you're doing swing mechanics, you're working on hitting the golf ball. When we're doing swing mechanics, we're on a tee. And right now it would be kind of like what Phil was talking about, making sure, one, can we get the kid into his back hip more and maybe increase that number a bit? And then after that, can we make it repeatable? The repeatability, that Phil talked about is so huge, because when you're talking about adaptability, it would be in golf as well. I think these guys are repeating their swing so much, and that's why they spend so much time on the range. And that's where, like you said, roll it up in your bag, walk to the driving range and be able to take a look at what you're looking at. Or for us, if I'm going and traveling to work with a college club and, lay that thing out, and we can go, can he repeat this first? Can we increase his number and can he repeat it? Now we got to go into hitting mechanics and get the ball moving. And those two things are very different in our sports. And I think those are the two things that separate us the most, is just the ball's elevated a bit more, obviously, and the ball
and it's moving.
In the game. Yeah. And in the game, it's moving. And that's the difference.
Moving.
Early on, we have to work on swing mechanics. The ball won't be moving. Later on, we need to get the ball moving and see if they can repeat this. And that's what's beautiful about the video. We can do that on a tee. We can do that with the ball moving on a front flip. We can do this against real pitchers. And that's our next, that's where we're going next. And I'm so excited about where we're going to be able to go, to watch the adaptations on the ground against real pitchers, to watch a guy make a manipulation against really good curveball and still deliver the barrel, and watch what's happening on the ground. It's going to be really, really cool.
I love it. We're so excited that you guys get to be part of our team while we figure all of those cool things out. Hey, I've got some good questions. We only have a few minutes left. So Phil, these are probably more for you. Ken Martin is asking, what did it's not two yellow trace lines represent, but there is one yellow trace line there. Can you talk about what that yellow line is? Exactly.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, it's a COP trace. So that's the exact moment in time of changes in pressure. So the athlete there has a base of support between the 2 feet, right? And his total mass. Well, within that is the center of mass. Within that is the center of pressure. With that, it changes. Okay, let's talk about center of pressure, center of gravity. Okay, let's make it simple. His center of gravity changes throughout that swing. What you're seeing there is where that center of pressure is. Okay, we can see that a player drifts and gets too far in the front side at contact, because into that, into his launch and pre-contact, we want to be able to generate that force back and get that center of pressure back to more of a center point to be able to harness enough power and velocity and control to be able to hit the baseball. You don't want to be drifting into that front side and then, slap the ball. You've lost your ability to create rotation, and it becomes way more linear. And that's something we don't want. So that one line, which looks like 2 lines, and they're angular lines as you're seeing there. This is a lesson that was recorded. Okay, so this was his total swing, and that's why it's presenting that way. If we did a biofeedback, we'd probably start with the beginning of trace, and then as the video went, you would start to see that little white dot. It would start to draw that, and that's basically drawing where his center of gravity or center of pressure is going, and that's really critical to know where that pressure is during the swing. And is it centered on his body that is creating, that balanced approach, or is he too far forwards? Is he sitting back? You see young kids squish the bug and sit way back in it. Where is that happening? When is that, going on? And then that's, really critical to understand. This is basically the trail that you have left behind during your functional movement. And it tells a lot about what happened at distinct moments in time during the actual swing.
Okay, you guys, really quickly, I just want to make sure that everyone realizes that the trace there, the yellow line is the linear trace. My team is sending me messages. The reason that you're not seeing a whole bunch of super high quality frames per second here is because this was not filmed with V1 cameras. We have pulled this video into V1 software because it has a trace captured. So we can look at a lot of cool stuff, but if you want to have a frame by frame video with super high quality, we can give you up to 240s. You will need high speed cameras, but we have a cool question about impact. One of the cool parts about our software is that we can look at impact in the baseball swing or the golf swing, talk a lot about pressure. Obviously, when the bat hits the ball or the club hits the ball is when we want the most impact, right? Or the most pressure, power, force, everything to make the ball go where it's supposed to. We have a question to point exact moment of impact. Anna has done her best to get there with this particular video. This one was pulled in. Phil, I'm assuming I'm right here. This was pulled in from something else. Is that right? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so just so you guys know, if you're using high speed, high quality cameras, you'll get much more, frames per second will be 240 at least. And you'll be able to capture that impact a little bit better than on this video. Really quickly, we have one more question, Phil, and the question is, does the mat measure the vertical force by percentage or by load? And can it measure twisting forces from the feet?
Yeah, no, good question. So, we're capturing, again, let's understand that you're capturing the force, the weight. Okay, so pressure mats can capture ground reaction forces. So yes, they can capture vertical. Okay, they can capture it in multiple ways. Okay, what is displayed in everybody's system or software and technology can be different. But it is capturing just like a force plate would capture. And then as far as, let's talk about in different directions, let's talk about force. Okay, if I create my feet in different directions, I create basically a torque force. Okay, and so when we see that, that's what creates angular momentum. So we're capturing that information and seeing that, and that's displayed. You know, there's an angular momentum that goes on, and here's something I'll just kind of wrap with today. I've been studying gait since my early days in cardiac therapy, when I started with a very important health system, one of the greatest in the world. And part of that was, you know, gait and understanding gait and what happens during gait and that transfer of pressure, that transfer of gravity. It's so similar to swing sports. If it's something that we have to understand, the control that goes on, the amount of pressure that is part of that load, and how we control our bodies in space. When we heel strike in a walking gait, okay, we put our force into our stance leg, okay, very much like putting that load into that backside, that trail side, however you want to say. That force through gait and that swing leg, okay, so maybe it's a stride, maybe it's not happening, it's not lifting off, it doesn't have to, but that force and that backside creates it into the heel. It then slowly transfers into the front of that foot, and then that transfer goes into the other side. Those figure eight angular, you know, momentum movements is what propels us, and that's what creates the power and force off the ground, and it allows us to move and create, you know, function and force. Very similar to swinging. And one of the things that we did early on is we tested, if someone has poor gait pattern, they're going to have poor swing pattern. And it's not just muscle skeletal. We're talking sensory, we're talking, you know, cognitive, we're talking all these types of things. So understanding that and understanding what's really being measured here, what's being captured is an important factor to how we're looking at a person perform movement. There's only 7 fundamental movement patterns. We just kind of cross them over to create different types of actions. And the one thing that, whether you're using pressure mats or you're using a force plate, you're grabbing that information. For me, I need to use, you know, segmentation. I need to use pressure to be able to understand what's going on for the medical and clinical space, as well as the sports science. I get more data from that.
Right.
It's just it's where I need to be to understand the human movement. Force plates, you know, work well too. I mean, I really see them as 3-dimensional, but it's complementary to each other. They live in the same space. But if you want to throw down a mat and you want to swing a golf club, or if you want to throw down a mat and swing a baseball bat, or take a pitch, it's going to be very hard, especially for me in my gait world, right? You can only put so many force plates down. I can spread out a pressure mat across that whole hallway, and I can just go walking, and I can measure all that information. It's the same thing for swings and different stances and different lengths and different movements. It's great to be able to have some portable device that I can throw down anywhere, and start measuring something. And that's, you know, super critical to me. And that's why I love measuring pressure.
I love it. Me too. I love putting it in the hands of golf instructors and now hopefully baseball instructors. So you guys, we shared a lot of really amazing information tonight. It will be posted on our YouTube channel in a few days when Anna edits and gets it out there. Will we hear from you again, Phil? Where do we find you? Where do we get to hear more of your genius knowledge about pressure?
Yeah, no, for sure. You will, unfortunately and fortunately. We're planning a baseball ground pressure series, just like this webinar, for all you baseball fanatics, knuckleheads, or whatever you want to call yourself. I call myself a baseball nut. We're going to have this, you know, bi-weekly. You can tune in, you can ask questions, you can learn about this. We also have a certification coming out to understand ground forces in baseball. And so this is anyone can, you know, sign up for it. It's totally free, that first level. I highly recommend, if you're a coach out there, trust me, I was having a conversation with a coach today. It's so important to, you know, embrace technology. The medical space is data driven. Sports space, we all know, has become data driven. It's a better way to assess quantitative, objective information, helps us be better. and the efficiency and flow that V1 can create, that simplicity, instead of making things so complex, a bunch of numbers on a screen. I don't know what that means. These graphs are simple to understand. Tune in, whether it's to Mandy's golf show or to my baseball one, you're going to learn a lot. And hopefully Mandy will have me back on her show again. Maybe I didn't bore the audience too much with the baseball talk and science talk.
Absolutely will. And thank you so much. V1 is growing. We're hiring lots of people to make us understand the technology and be able to use it in whatever aspect we're using it in, whether that be baseball or golf or fitness or whatever it may be, archery. I've got someone, an equestrian, using the pressure mat. So thank you so much for bringing your knowledge. Thank you, Chad. I am excited to hear more from you. I would really like to dive deeper into what you're doing with the juniors, the kids. I think pressure in kids is a whole different ballgame than adults. Sure. Body weight is a part of that, right? They just don't have as much weight to put on the mat. So we'd like to hear more from you. And, I know we're past time, but if you'd like to get in touch with us, Kelly has put our contact information in the chat window. If you're interested in these certifications, please just email pressure@v1sports.com. If you're interested in purchasing anything from V1, whether that be a pressure mat or cameras, you can email sales@v1sports.com. If you'd like to send me a message or Phil a message, our emails are there. If you want to send us a golf joke, that's fine too. Well, we love to hear it all. Anyway, we'll see you all next Tuesday Traces, 7 p.m. I love it. Thanks for joining us. Have a fun one, everyone. Cheers. Peace out.
Here, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.